All right, I'm going to do this quick as well, even though Doug didn't tell me to keep it short. I will. This is fantastic. Such a great introduction both to the gardens and the people. And as Pam was going through, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm thinking, well, Doug helped design this. Doug worked here. Doug helped design this. Doug did this. And Doug Ruhren is perhaps the finest pure gardener that I've ever met. His knowledge of plants, how to put them together, how they grow. I've been doing this professionally for 30 years, and I asked Doug, when do I cut back my Nisphofia? Because it always seems to, and I don't know how to do that sometimes. Doug Ruhren was a longtime volunteer here. He stepped in as to help keep us going when Dr. JC Raulston passed away in an untimely accident. Moved away, came back, and was our gardens manager for a while, and now is at Juniper Level Botanic Garden as the garden curator there. He's part of the reason why we have these fantastic gardens that Pam showed us all across the state. And before I do have to do one plug and say that one of the benefits of being a member is all the organizations across the state that give you benefits as a member for here, including big bloomers and including reciprocal admission to other gardens. So across the country, you can go to gardens for free or discounted all across the country and all across the state if you're a member of the JC Raulston Arboretum. And you can see all these gardens that Doug has had his hand in. I'm going to turn it over to Doug because he's going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know about perennials in 30 minutes. Right, Doug? Exactly.
Thank you very Thank you very much, Mark. That was very, very generous of you. Welcome. Welcome to the Triangle area if you're a newcomer. Welcome to gardening if you're new to gardening. I've gardened all my life. Some people think that probably goes back as far as the Garden of Eden, but not quite. And because my own history is relevant to new arrivals in this area, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I moved here after college in 1979, and so North Carolina was once brand new to me. And we are going to have to fly through my presentation. Might not even get through it all, but if you go away with nothing at all, I want you to go away with the sense that you can grow such an incredible range of plants in this area. So if you're a newcomer or new to gardener, don't be thinking that, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to grow anything here. It's an incredible area. And Pam did a superb job of introducing you to the fact that at least, well, not at least, but even just in the Triangle, there's these incredible gardens to visit. And though I do have a 4-year degree in plant science, that was not the end of my education. Every day is a day part of my education, and certainly visiting gardens has been a big part of my education. And I have loved the JC Raulston Arboretum since I first moved here in 1979, and it too has been a big part of my education. And just a little bit of business, I brought copies of the Plant Delights catalog. They're out front. If you don't pick up one, you can find all of these offerings online, about 800 additional plants online that aren't in the catalog. And we do have an open house coming up at the end of February. It's the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the last 3 in February, and then the first 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in March. And with that, let's see, is this the clicker? Yes. Okay. Let's see, I hope there's not a nuclear button on it. So we're talking about perennials, and let's see, there we go. I have to be a little bit of an educator. So all plants are either annual, biennial, and perennial. Annuals, true annuals, there are a lot of plants we treat as annuals. True annuals grow from seed, mature, flower, and produce seed and die in a year's time. You know, some vegetables are clear examples of that. If you've ever grown corn, you know, it flowers, it produces corn, and then it's dead by the end of the summer. There aren't that many biennials, but true biennials make a vegetative plant one year, flower the next year, and die. The old-fashioned foxgloves were biennials. And perennials are plants that live year after year after year. Well, it went the wrong way, I guess. Or, here we go. Oh, Lordy. Maybe there we go. I think I just figured out I was pushing the wrong, but I'm going the wrong way. I have it now. Now, most often when people say perennials, they're just thinking about herbaceous perennials, but perennials can either be woody or herbaceous. The woody perennials, the trees and shrubs, have permanent stems that live from year to year. Herbaceous plants live year after year, but they don't have stems that persist year after year. Most perennials just die to the ground come winter. Of course, nothing's ever as cut and dry. Now, I need to define winter hardy. Winter hardy is surviving the winters of the area in which they grow. So, you know, I grew up in New Jersey, and some of the things that are winter hardy here are not winter hardy there. You know, we always had to dig cannas and gladiolus before winter because they were not winter hardy here. But because this is a milder climate, they're winter hardy here. So winter hardiness is always relative to the climate in which it's being grown. So when most people use the term perennial, it's shorthand for winter hardy, herbaceous, perennial. So got to get that out of the way. What are the growing conditions of this area? Well, traditionally we're in zone 7, the warmer end of zone 7, 7B, and the typical low was, you know, 5 to 10 degrees or so. Some people now consider we're in a warmer zone, zone 8. But you know, different areas can have the same low, but a really significant part, especially when we're talking about herbaceous perennials, is that our cold spells tend to be really brief. So we rarely get much frost penetration in the ground. If you're from colder parts of the country, you know that the ground freezes rock hard for months at a time in the winter. That doesn't usually happen here. So a lot of herbaceous perennials, you know, safely tucked underground, survive our winters where they might not if it was an area that went to the same low temperature, but those cold spells persisted for a long time. We're a fairly wet climate, though rainfall is very inconsistent over the years. You know, you could have extended dry spells, certainly known years where weeks at a time when it seemed to rain more days than not. And our soils are very variable. Pam mentioned the 3 regions of the state. East of Raleigh, you're largely out on the coastal plain where the soils tend to be sandy. Sandy soils tend to dry out quickly. In the Piedmont, we tend to have clays. There's many different types of clay. If you have some of our clay soils are our very best soils. If you have a good red clay soil, it can, you know, and any clay soil is improved with soil amendments, especially organic soil amendments. So don't despair if you have clay soil. Take care of your soil. If you haven't yet done so, take a class on soils. Bryce Lane teaches soils classes here. Tony Avent at Plant Delights Nursery teaches a one-day class on soils. You know, work with your soils and make them better. All right, now we're going to fly through some plants, and this is just to give you a taste of the tremendous diversity of plants that can be grown. It's maybe 1% of everything you can grow. I'm a big fan of the flowering maples, the Butylon. They're hibiscus relatives. They'll bloom from spring up until frost. This little one, Butylon megapotamicum, it's been in the Arboretum for 40 years probably. And it often blooms well into the winter if the winter hasn't gotten too cold. They're sort of shrubs. If the winter is cold, they'll die to the ground. So then they behave like herbaceous perennials. Just another example. There's many selections. In all these groups of plants, you have to do a little research before you purchase them, because like in the butylons or the agaves, there are ones that are winter hardy in this area and others that are not. This is Plant Delight's, Juniper level Botanic Garden are the display gardens that are supported by Plant Delight's nursery. So they're sort of one and the same. And it's one of the best places, I have to think, in the East Coast to see agaves. A lot of really serious agave breeding going on there. And, I took this picture last week, lousy picture, I agree. But the agaves are gorgeous architectural plants year-round, especially valuable in the wintertime. So if you have a dry soil or you're coming from the Southwest and you miss these plants, then there's so many selections that can be grown in this area. The shot on the right is here at the Arboretum several winters ago, and you can see that agave, not minding the covering of snow. And the one on the left, just a really beautiful, smaller growing agave, agave Victoria reginae. Whoops, there I go. And then if you want to work with these dryland plants, there's a wide range of cactus that are winter hardy, many different prickly pears. And just two shots to show the gorgeous flowers that a lot of these hardy ones have. Alstroemeria, you probably know, is the cut flower from the florist shop, or does anyone go to florist shops anymore? Grocery store. Superb cut flower, lasts for many weeks. But the modern selections of Peruvian lilies that have been bred for garden use will bloom from spring up until frost. This is a newer selection called Indian Summer. Cut them and use them in the house, or just enjoy them in the garden. Why didn't that go? There was no real logical way to organize all these different plants, so I just roughly worked in an alphabetical order. Because if I lumped shade plants together, well, a lot of groups of plants like iris, there's some that grow in shade and some grow in sun, so I decided just to go sort of in alphabetical order. If you're coming from colder parts of the country, you might know the cast iron plants as a house plant, but many species are winter hardy in zone 7. This is a real pretty selection of Aspidistra elatior called snowcap. They are evergreen, except if we have an unusually cold winter, and they are plants for shade and very tolerant to dry shade as well. Green foliage is a beautiful thing in the garden, especially I especially appreciate it in the winter. The one on the left is Aspidistra retusus Nanjing green. We're still looking excellent after 18 degrees, and it'll tolerate much lower. And the one on the right, a new selection that looks like the sloppy painters were working nearby. The Carex is a huge genus. Somewhat sun, somewhat shade. Some are many native, hundreds and hundreds of native species. This is a selection of Carex oceamensis. This is one of the most common landscape plants right now. It hasn't been in the nursery trade for terribly long, but you've probably seen this bright yellow foliage in landscapes in this area. The one on the left, Carex cherokeensis, is one of the few that's sort of showy in bloom, but still a subtle display. And one on the right, at the top of the picture, an example of one that is a beautiful foliage plant through the summer months, but dies away in the winter. Crinums are a plant that are sort of plant that have been in gardens in the South for a long time. They are incredibly tough. They often will outlive a house. You'll see a row of crinums out in the country, and there's no longer any house out there, but the crinums are still going on. They're amaryllis relatives. They grow from a really large bulb, sometimes football size, and they will bloom through the summer months. The color range is white, pink, and burgundy red. And they're one of those things, you plant them, and each year, provided they have decent growing conditions, just get better year after year. Okay. Elephant ears. Whether you live in this climate or not, maybe you like to create a garden that looks really tropical in the summer, and there are so many selections of elephant ears nowadays. I know 40 years ago, you had one that had a little bit of black in the leaf and green foliaged ones. Now there are so many incredible selections. And generally in Zone 7, they are winter hardy. This is a shiny black one called black coral. I made the note up top that this is the same plant as taro, so this is an example of an edible plant that is also grown as an ornamental. Two more selections, Maui Gold on the left and Pharaoh's Mask on the right. Epimediums, I've never heard anyone really use the common name of fairy wings. Most people just call them epimediums. They do have a common name that is much longer standing, but again, one I've never heard anybody use, of barren wort. W-O-R-T is just an old English word for plant. These are shade garden plants. Again, they range from clump formers to ground covers, spreading plants. The ground covers are really good small-scale ground covers for the shade garden. The earliest ones will soon be in bloom, but they bloom through late winter and spring. Some cultivars are deciduous. The foliage will die away come fall. Others are evergreen, and some of the evergreens have really beautiful foliage through the winter months. And I haven't yet said deer won't eat these. And I will say one thing about deer. If I say, deer won't eat these, someone will put their hand up in the audience and say, they eat it in my garden. And yes, that is exactly the way deer behave. But, if you're gardening with deer, it's good to start with the things that deer generally don't eat. And I've not known them to eat epimediums. All right. Ferns, huge group. If you're interested in ferns, Plant Delight's Nursery Juniper Level Botanic Garden has one of the largest collections of winter hardy ferns in the garden for you to view. Just like the epimediums, some are clump formers, some are runners, some are evergreen, some are deciduous. And again, I'm going to say deer don't eat them. I figure they also survived the dinosaurs. So, if the dinosaurs didn't eat them, the deer probably also find them unpalatable. There is one fern that humans eat, the ostrich fern. The fiddleheads are harvested in the spring. Geraniums, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Some are evergreens, some are deciduous, some want shade, some want sun. I think a lot of people who know a little bit about perennials are surprised to learn that there are some that prefer shade. This is a modern hybrid Roseanne or Roxanne, or maybe I misspelled it, I don't know. And when it's happy, it will bloom all summer long. I haven't always been tremendously successful with that one, but it's really worth trying because if it's happy, it's amazing how long it blooms. Here are two for the shade garden. The one on the left, geranium Biakova is evergreen. And the one on the right, Geranium phaeum, is sort of half evergreen. There's already quite a bit of foliage in the garden. And Geranium phaeum is known as the mourning widow because the flowers are about that same dark burgundy of the marking in the leaf. And not all of the Geranium phaeum cultivars have burgundy in the leaf, but this is a selection samovar that has a very pronounced amount of them. And the flowers aren't tremendously showy, but it's in bloom for probably about 2 months. I've always loved ornamental grasses. I hope people might go away and say, well, I haven't yet learned to love them rather than I hate them. But I took this picture a week ago here at the Arboretum, and I value the ornamental grasses year-round, but I think their strongest season for some of them are the winter months when you have these beautiful seed heads on the plant. They do provide overwintering habitat for beneficial creatures, and some of the grasses provide seed for birds. They come in a range of sizes. There are some garden selections that are absolutely gigantic. Two natives that I really like are the one on the left, Panicum virgatum, known as switchgrass, clump former, really beautiful all winter. Late winter on a warm sunny day, you'll hear this popping noise. The seeds are expelled explosively, so it sounds like small-scale popcorn in the garden. The one on the right, the Sporobolus, is prairie dropseed. It makes a really tight tuft of foliage, only about 1 foot tall, maybe 18 inches tall, and then in bloom it's about 3 feet tall. A curious thing about that, it's fragrant when it's in bloom. You don't think of fragrance from grasses in general, but it's a fragrance you'll notice from a distance. I know somebody who's allergic to the fragrance of it, and curious thing is that she and her husband run a grass nursery. The ginger lilies, the hedychium, are a lot like cannas. Most of them are large growing plants, the 5 to 6 foot tall or taller range. This is a smaller one called Slim's Orange. Most want sun. They certainly don't have to have sun all day. That's one thing I should say. If you're coming from colder parts of the country where you tend to grow sun-loving perennials in a location where they have sun all day, our sun is so strong here. A lot of sun lovers will get by with like half a day of sun. I have a big daylily collection in pots at home, and my little backyard has not a single tree, but it's ringed by trees outside the property. And there's a little hole in the sky. At the most, they get 6 hours of sun, and they bloom quite well. I really like the hedychiums. They bloom late summer up until frost, and it's a time when when there are fewer other things blooming. So I try to work them into most gardens. One of the great joys of gardening in this area is that there are a lot of things that bloom through the winter months. Walk through the Arboretum when you're here today and you'll see many different things blooming. I saw the Algerian iris in bloom when I was walking from the parking lot down to this building this morning. This is the Christmas rose. Some of those are already done blooming, having started in November and December. The Lenten rose are very fertile plants, and so I like a lot of these modern hybrids that give you a similar floral display, but don't produce any seedlings. And why would that be a benefit? Well, it might not be a benefit to everybody, but if you've grown Lenten roses, they sort of become like the zucchinis of the flower world, where you have to, under the cover of darkness, leave seedlings on your neighbor's doorstep. Now, you can cut the seed heads off of the fertile hellebores before the seed is shed, but if you don't, you'll have a carpet of seedlings. So, in the busy gardener who doesn't have enough time for their gardens might benefit by paying maybe a little extra money for these sterile hybrids. You'll get the same kind of floral display in the garden, but you'd not have to deal with seedlings. And all of these sterile hybrids are clones. So if you bought Anna's Red, if each of you went out to different garden centers and bought Anna's Red, they're all going to be exactly identical. Whereas a lot of the Lenten roses are seed strains. So a lot of them will be close enough to what they're supposed to be, but they won't be absolutely identical. So, you know, when you buy one of these, you're going to get exactly what you are expecting to get. Hibiscus are fun. I realize I haven't mentioned too many of the plants that will tolerate wet soils, because in this area you might end up with wet soils. And I do not think a wet soil is a detriment. You just select the right plants for it. There's a really useful garden term, don't fight the site. You know, if your garden tends to be dry, well, don't focus on water-loving plants. Focus on plants that are more drought tolerant. If you have a wet site, don't try to make it into a well-drained site. You can do that, but there's no end of beautiful plants that you can fill a wet site with, and end up with a lovely garden. Pam showed you pictures of Daniel Stowe Botanical Garden. We had an artificially created wet site because my boss could not be convinced that you didn't have to run the irrigation every other day on red clay. And after that irrigation run in some of those gardens, we had standing water. And so I had to substitute a lot of wet site tolerant plants in those gardens for the plants that are originally specified for that garden. So I have a lot of experience with wet sites, and you can create beautiful gardens in a wet site or a dry site. You just have to choose the right plants. All right, I keep on pushing the wrong button, I'm sorry. Just another example on the left of one of the modern hybrid hibiscus. You know, some selections only get about 3 feet tall, others 5, 6 feet tall or more. If those, those big flowers are really fun, but if it's not to your liking, the wild species hibiscus are really worthwhile plants. The one on the right is the Texas Star or Scarlet Mallow, which is typically red. This is just a white one. And it's one of my favorite plants because it blooms through the summers. Hummingbirds love the flowers. The butterflies land on those big, broad petals. They're sort of a landing pad for butterflies. And then it's a beautiful plant in the winter. The stems turn silvery. The seed pods are really showy then too. Daylilies. Daylilies can be grown successfully in almost the entire country, all the way down to Florida. Now, if you grow daylilies and you have deer, you'll probably never see them bloom unless you protect them. There are repellents that can work quite well. The selection in daylilies is almost endless, so you can find something you like. I collect old-fashioned daylilies that still look like daylilies, but I'll get off that soapbox. Hostas, superb plants for the shade garden. I'd avoid a really dry area in a shade garden. They range in size from teeny tiny things. That's not a giant's hand. That's my very own hand. That's full size, a tiny little one called Pandora's box. There's others that get, the foliage will get 4 feet tall and 6 feet wide. I do think they tend to get bigger in milder climates than they do here, or maybe up in the mountains like some of those mountain gardens Pam mentioned a moment ago. And on the right, I'm always like to remind people that green is a lovely color in the garden, and some of the green foliaged hostas are really beautiful. Yes, Hostas are one of the first things that deer will eat in the garden. They're also bothered by voles. I saw a private garden in Cary, North Carolina, where the person collected hostas. He planted them in pots, which were then sunk in the ground, and I believe that largely protected the hostas from voles. Irises, huge group of plants. Different species range in what they need. Again, sun or shade. Some must have dry growing conditions. Others will grow in standing water. I mentioned the Algerian iris that's blooming now, so many, many months of iris bloom. This is an old-fashioned bearded iris, again, something that's grown across most of the country. They do extremely well here. Just avoid a wet soil. They're very drought tolerant. Louisiana iris, sort of the opposite end of the moisture level. They will do fine in average soil moisture. They will thrive in a wet site, even growing out into standing water at the edge of a pond. Large range of color. There's a new range of hybrids, the Sudatas, on the left that are clump formers and don't produce any seedlings like one of their parents, and just bloom late in the iris season. They're really phenomenally good plants. We saw elephant ears a moment ago. If you want to go with tropical look, there are a number of bananas that are winter hardy in this ones. The edible ones you buy in the grocery store are not winter hardy. This is a huge one, Musa balbiciana. It dies to the ground every winter and gets about 20 foot tall. A person would be, put a 6-foot person in that picture, and the banana is at least 3 times taller than that. The Japanese fiber Musa baju is common in gardens now. I no longer love that plant because it spreads pretty strongly. This gives you the same foliage effect, but it is a clump former. And a much smaller scale banana, and I don't understand why the slides came through like that. But this only gets 6, maybe 7 foot tall if you go up to the very tip of the leaf. This is the pink velvet banana, Musa velutina. And it's atypical for a banana because it blooms on the current year stems. So every year it flowers and fruits. And the fruit are edible, but the wild bananas are mostly seed inside the peel. So about 5 to 10% of what's inside the peel is edible. The rest are big, hard seeds. The bananas and plantains we eat, the little freckles, are seeds that never developed. A lot of cultivated edible plants, fruiting plants, are sterile. Nepeta, catmint, easy in a drier spot, avoid a wet spot. But blooming for months, it's a superb plant for pollinators. I haven't said anything about pollinators yet. We all want to do our part for supporting pollinators, but also do it just for the fun of enjoying the pollinators in the garden, just like you put out food for the birds and enjoy watching the birds. Put out plants for pollinators and get to enjoy them. Daffodils, most daffodils thrive in this area. Some do better here than in colder climates. New gardeners often freak out when their daffodils come up in the fall. Well, not all daffodils do. The big trumpet daffodils stay dormant most of the winters, but a lot of daffodils, well, there's some that are in bloom already. Some plants that are of Mediterranean origin, many daffodil species are native to southern Europe and North Africa. And in a Mediterranean climate, they're dormant in the hot, dry summers and then come into active growth through the winter months. So don't panic when your narcissus put up foliage. Phlox, a huge genus, all of them natives. This is Phlox divaricata, a good one for the woodland garden, spring blooming. Phlox are really good for pollinators. The one on the left, Phlox bedazzled pink, is a hybrid. One of its parents is Phlox subulata, which is, they start to bloom this year and really good for pollinators early in the spring. And Phlox paniculata blooms for months in the summer, comes in a wide range of colors. Pycnanthemum, the mountain mint. If you want to have an insect zoo, this is the plant to visit. You will see such a wide range of pollinators on those flowers, and they bloom for months. People often avoid Pycnanthemum because they've grown Pycnanthemum muticum, which is a strong spreader, but some of the species are clump formers or at least slow spreaders. Now, if you have a large garden, the spreading plants are really valuable because they, to a very large extent, prevent weeds from coming up through their mass of stems and stuff. I can understand you're going to avoid a strong spreader if your garden is small, but select one of the mountain mints that is a clump former, and you'll do so much good for native pollinators, for any kind of pollinators. Salvia, sage, is a huge genus, I think like 500 different species. If you grow, and so many of them are not winter hardy in colder climates, but so many of them are winter hardy in this area. This is the mealy cup sage. There's a seed strain, Victoria, that is sold as an annual. It's the only one I haven't found to be winter hardy. All the other selections of Salvia Varieties have proven to be winter hardy, and they're in bloom from probably April up until frost. And bumblebees love the flowers. It's also a good cut flower. The one on the left, Salvia guarnitica, again, select one of the modern selections that is a clump former rather than a spreader, unless you have room for a spreader. And if you planted one plant for hummingbirds, I would plant Salvia guarnitica. I know it goes against the belief that hummingbirds are attracted to red flowers. Hummingbirds are attracted to almost any flower. They'll even visit iris. Because this will bloom from April to frost, and the hummingbirds will visit it probably before they visit almost anything else. It will thrive in full sun. It will survive in average moisture to wet soils. It will it will make a very good show in bright shade or part shade. So very adaptable and permanent in the garden. The one on the right, Salvia microphylla, is really more of a shrub, but it sort of doesn't get covered by shrub people, so I like to include it. Again, blooming for spring up until frost. Salvia gregii is its very close cousin, and there's hybrids between the two. They come in a wide range of colors, and again, highly favored by hummingbirds. There are also salvias for the shade garden. This is I think I have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Thank you, Carol. I didn't realize you were back there with that. That's really helpful because I know end of slideshow. Is it really? Oh, okay. Getting back to this Salvia glabrescens, it's a fall bloomer, but a really, really nice display in the fall garden. Disappears in the winter, has handsome foliage through the summer, and is available in several other colors. And there's not an overabundance of winter hardy herbaceous perennials that bloom in the fall in the shade garden, so this is a really nice addition. And you can add it to other fall bloomers for the shade garden, like, well, Carol, you're now showing 2 minutes and 22 seconds. I'm confused. What does that mean?
You're over.
All right, well, then I'll stop here. Okay, yeah. Well, I'm thrilled I got through all that. I sure didn't think I would. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk later on.